Welcome back to the series. In the first video, we explored some of the defining characteristics of Chronicle 1 as it existed back in 2004. Just as a quick recap, we talked about how progression took a considerable amount of time, how many players considered the endgame to begin somewhere around levels 40 to 49, and how most players focused on developing a single character. We also covered the absence of special abilities on weapons, which meant a much wider variety of weapons remained viable throughout the game. There were no auto soul shots, no macros, and no vampiric rage. Players couldn't alter their characters' base statistics with dies, B-grade armor sets had no set bonuses, the world map had to be earned through a quest, and, perhaps most notoriously, dying to a monster carried the risk of dropping an item from your inventory. But enough of that. With that reminder out of the way, let's finally begin discussing the classes themselves. Today, we'll be looking at the Bards, the Swordsinger and the Bladedancer. Using this Chronicle 1 skill tree provided by Focus D, we can immediately notice something that stands out. Compared to later Chronicles, both classes possessed surprisingly few abilities. Many of the songs, dances, and utility skills players would later associate with these classes simply didn't exist yet. Originally, both Bards began their journey as knights before evolving into supportive frontline fighters after their second class transfer. Rather than becoming dedicated tanks, they transformed into durable support classes capable of significantly strengthening an entire party. Before we look at each class individually, however, it's worth remembering the environment in which they were played. Again, soul shots were expensive, and that affected every class in the game, regardless of whether it fought in melee, at range, physically, or magically. The Bards were no exception. Without vampiric rage and with soul shots being far too valuable to waste carelessly, grinding required patience. You couldn't simply rely on life steal to survive. Every pull had to be considered carefully, and fighting monsters significantly above your level was rarely worth the risk. There was also one mechanic every Swordsinger and Bladedancer needed to take in consideration. Songs and dances had to be alternated to preserve mana, if a Swordsinger and a Bladedancer were in the same party. One song, one dance, and so on. Alternating them prevented the increasing mana cost associated with repeatedly casting abilities of the same type, allowing both Bards to maintain their support throughout long grinding sessions while consuming only the base MP cost of each ability. Now let's continue with the Swordsinger. According to the original class description, the Swordsinger was designed to raise the morale of the party through its songs. While it originated from the Knight class, the Prima official game guide explains that after level 40 it gradually abandoned the role of a traditional tank, becoming one of Chronicle 1's most valuable support classes. Choosing a Swordsinger also meant choosing the elf race. As we mentioned in the previous video, elves possess the highest dexterity among the fighter races, giving them excellent movement speed, attack speed, and evasion. Rather than relying on raw strength like dark elves, Swordsingers excelled through mobility and support. Its greatest strength, however, came from its songs. Every song lasted 120 seconds, meaning the Swordsinger constantly had to refresh them throughout long hunting sessions. The first song that Swordsinger had access to was Song of Warding, increasing the party's magic defense by 30%. While this sounded impressive, most monsters around level 40 relied on physical attacks, making it considerably more valuable during PvP than ordinary grinding. Later, the Swordsinger learned Song of Invocation, increasing defense against undead's damage. At first glance it may seem like an odd choice for one of only 20 buff slots, but remember that areas like the Cemetery and Dragon Valley were filled with undead monsters. Under those circumstances, the song easily could justify its place. Then, for the next two songs this Bard got, came the Butter and the Bread. At level 46, the Swordsinger learned the Bread, Song of Wind, increasing the party's movement speed by 15%. Back in Chronicle 1, movement speed was surprisingly difficult to obtain. Wind Walk remained the only common support buff that increased it, while Berserker Spirit still lacked its later movement bonus. For parties moving between distant monster groups, Song of Wind noticeably improved grinding efficiency. Then, at level 49, came the Butter. Song of Hunter. It didn't simply improve critical rate. It doubled it. According to Focus D's research, an assassin having Focus level 3 together with Song of Hunter could exceed 500 critical rate, suggesting that Chronicle 1 had no practical critical rate cap. Without focused special abilities on weapons, this song became one of the strongest offensive buffs in the game. It even allowed the Swordsinger itself to experiment with bows while farming weaker monsters. Afterwards came Song of Life, increasing HP regeneration by 20%. Useful, certainly, although the Prima Guide mentions that some Swordsingers occasionally skipped it in order to conserve mana. At level 55, the class learned Song of Earth, increasing physical defense by 15%. Players who remember later Chronicles may recall a 25% bonus, but that improvement came later. In Chronicle 1, 15% was enough to make it another core party buff. Finally, at level 58, the Swordsinger received Song of Water. This is one of those forgotten Chronicle 1 mechanics. Instead of granting only 3 evasion as in later Chronicles, Song of Water provided 10 evasion. Even more interesting, Agility level 3 granted 8 evasion, compared to only 4 in Interlude. Those numbers explain why evasion was considered such an important statistic during the early Chronicles, and why later light armor sets and special abilities often focused on increasing it. Besides its songs, the Swordsinger also possessed several useful abilities. It retained self-buffs such as Might, Shield, Wind Walk, and Magic Barrier, allowing it to remain reasonably independent while soloing. Elemental Heal continued receiving upgrades after level 40, although its MP cost made it a tool for emergencies rather than constant use. The class also had access to Entangle, and unlike later Chronicles, its effect lasted an incredible 2 minutes. Against melee opponents, especially in PvP, that could be an extremely frustrating debuff to deal with. Finally, there was Sword Symphony. While its damage wasn't remarkable enough to define the class, it added another offensive option and reminded players that the Swordsinger wasn't simply standing behind the party refreshing songs, it was expected to fight alongside everyone else. Solo play reflected the philosophy of Chronicle 1 itself. Without vampiric rage, with expensive soul shots, and no overwhelming offensive abilities, grinding required patience. Players commonly used two-handed swords, sword and shield, daggers, or even bows to take advantage of Song of Hunter. Inside a party, however, the Swordsinger truly came into its own. Keep the songs active. Support the front line. Use aggression whenever additional control was needed. It's also worth remembering that aggression only worked in PvE. Thanks to the elf's naturally high dexterity and the additional movement speed from Song of Wind, Swordsingers also became surprisingly effective pullers for AoE groups, even competing with dedicated tanks for that role. Now, let's see how people back then viewed this bard. Looking through older community discussions reveals a remarkably consistent opinion. Players rarely praised the Swordsinger for its personal damage. Instead, they praised how much stronger it made everyone else. Many described it as a class that felt fairly average at first but became increasingly valuable as more songs were unlocked. Others simply remarked that you never truly appreciate a Swordsinger until you spend a few hours farming without one. And perhaps that summarizes the class better than anything else. The Swordsinger wasn't designed to be the star of the party. It was designed to make everyone else shine. Now let's continue with the Bladedancer. According to the original class description, the Bladedancer wasn't known for being the strongest tank, nor the highest damage dealer. Instead, its true strength came from the powerful dances it brought to the party, making it one of the most desirable support classes in Chronicle 1. Like the Swordsinger, it gradually abandoned its role as a traditional knight after level 40, becoming a frontline support that fought alongside the party rather than standing safely behind it. Choosing a Bladedancer also meant choosing the Dark Elf race. As we mentioned in the previous video, Dark Elf fighters possessed the highest strength of all fighter races, allowing them to hit harder than elves, humans, or dwarves. The trade-off, however, was lower constitution, making them noticeably more fragile. Combined with powerful debuffs and respectable offensive abilities, the Bladedancer offered a much more aggressive style of support than its elven counterpart. Unlike the Swordsinger, the Bladedancer was also tied to one particular weapon: dual swords. Without them, the class simply couldn't perform its dances. Well, it's important to note that in this bard's case, there was also some experimentation with bows. Occasionally. Just like songs, every dance lasted 120 seconds, meaning they had to be refreshed constantly throughout long hunting sessions. the very first dance, learned at level 40, was Dance of Fire. This increased the party's critical damage by 50%. Not critical rate, that remained the Swordsinger specialty, but critical damage itself. Interestingly, later Chronicles reduced this bonus to 35%, making the Chronicle 1 version considerably stronger. According to the Prima Guide, Dance of Fire was especially effective for dagger users and archers, classes capable of landing frequent critical hits. Blunt weapon users, on the other hand, benefited much less. 3 levels later came Dance of Light. Much like Song of Invocation, many players today underestimate this dance because it only affected undead enemies. Back in Chronicle 1, however, hunting grounds such as the Cemetery and Dragon Valley were filled with undead monsters, making Dance of Light one of the strongest situational buffs available. According to the Prima Guide, it increased melee damage against undead by 20 to 40%. It's also worth noting that, just like the Cleric's Holy Weapon, this bonus only affected normal melee attacks. At level 46, the Blade Dancer learned Dance of Inspiration, increasing the party's accuracy by 4. The Prima Guide especially recommends it for dagger users, archers, and polearm fighters, all of whom naturally struggled more with accuracy than blunt weapon users. Then, at level 49, came Dance of Mystic. Instead of helping physical fighters, this dance increased the party's magic attack by 20%, making it an outstanding choice for groups built around sorcerers, spellhowlers, or other offensive spellcasters. Chronicle 1 constantly encouraged players to adapt their buffs to the party they were playing with, and Dance of Mystic is perhaps one of the best examples of that philosophy. At level 52, the Blade Dancer received Dance of Concentration, increasing casting speed by 30% while also reducing the chance of spell interruption by 40%. Combined with Dance of Mystic, it transformed the Blade Dancer into an exceptional companion for mage parties. Then came one of the most important dances in the entire class. At level 55, the Blade Dancer learned Dance of Warrior, increasing the party's physical attack by 12%. The Prima Guide describes it as one of the class's most valuable dances, and it's easy to understand why. Combined with buffs such as Might, Focus, Haste and Death Whisper, it became one of the core reasons every melee party wanted a Blade Dancer. Finally, at level 58, the class received Dance of Fury. This increased the party's attack speed by 15%. Unlike several of the previous dances, whose usefulness depended on party composition or hunting location, Dance of Fury was universally valuable. Almost every physical class benefited from attacking faster, making it one of the Blade Dancer's defining abilities. Besides its dances, the Blade Dancer also possessed several excellent utility skills. Hex reduced an enemy's physical defense, while Power Break lowered its physical attack. The Prima Guide even recommends opening difficult encounters with these debuffs before engaging in combat. At level 52, both skills became even stronger. The class also learned Poison and, later, Poison Blade Dance. Poison is particularly interesting because its damage wasn't influenced by magic attack. Some Dark Elf fighters experimented with opening fights by casting poison before switching to normal attacks. The downside, however, was that its success rate still depended on magic attack, making it somewhat unreliable. For solo play, the Blade Dancer remained perfectly capable of leveling on its own. Thanks to Drain Energy, respectable debuffs, and its Knight heritage, it possessed enough survivability to grind decently. Like every fighter in Chronicle 1, however, it still had to respect expensive soul shots and the complete absence of vampiric rage. Inside a party, the Blade Dancer truly came into its own. Keep the dances active. Support the front line. Apply Hex or Power Break whenever necessary. And, just like the Swordsinger, alternate your dances with songs to avoid the increasing MP cost of repeatedly casting the same type of support skill. Finally, looking through old community discussions reveals a remarkably consistent opinion. Players rarely praised the Blade Dancer for its personal damage or dueling potential. Instead, they praised how much stronger it made everyone around it. Many even referred to it as a party assistant rather than simply a buffer, emphasizing that a good Blade Dancer wasn't expected to stand in the back refreshing dances. It fought alongside the front line, weakened enemies with debuffs, adapted its dances to the party composition, and quietly became one of the most valuable members of every group. So, how did players choose between the two bards? The answer was surprisingly subjective. Neither class was objectively better than the other. Instead, the choice often came down to personal preference and, perhaps even more importantly, the race you wanted to play. Did you prefer the Dark Elf's higher strength, stronger debuffs, and a slightly more offensive approach? Then the Bladedancer was probably the right choice. Or did you value the Elf's higher dexterity, greater movement speed, and a wider selection of self-buffs? In that case, the Swordsinger might have suited you better. The Bladedancer rewarded players who enjoyed weakening their enemies with Hex and Power Break while empowering the party. The Swordsinger, on the other hand, focused more on improving survivability, mobility, and critical potential through its songs. Neither choice was wrong. Both classes were welcomed into virtually every serious party, and both became increasingly valuable as more songs and dances were unlocked. Ultimately, choosing a bard wasn't about picking the stronger class. It was about choosing which style of support you enjoyed the most. And perhaps that's one of the things Chronicle 1 did best. Every class had its own identity. Not just in the skills it learned, but in the way it approached the game.